Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brittany of BrittanyJJones.com. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the channel. I hope that you will like what you see and subscribe below for more. In today's video, we are going to be sewing. I put up a little story here on YouTube and asked you all if you would like a sew along from McCalls 8253, and majority of you all said yes. So today we are going to be sewing. I'm going to be following along with view C on this pattern. This will be my second time making this dress. The first time I made it, I used a tie-dye French terry knit from Melanated Fabrics. I'm actually going to be using the same fabric. I'm just going to use a different colorway. This is a new colorway that we just added to the store and I absolutely love it. It's just giving sunburst, sunset. I'm obsessed with it. And so I said I need to use his fabric to make another one. So again, for fabric, I'm going to be using a tie-dye French terry knit. As far as sizing goes, I have cut the size 22W. The first dress I made, I cut the 24W and it was just a little big in my bust as well as around the waist. So I decided to cut this one down a size and see how that fits. So for sizing, again, I'm going to be cutting the 22W. And again, we're going to be making view C. I really am excited to make this dress again. I feel like it comes together really easy. It's just 4 pattern pieces for view C. So you have your upper front, your lower front, your back piece is 1 full piece, and you also have the sleeves. So the only thing that I'm going to be doing different is for the drawstring. I didn't purchase any drawstring. I'm just making my own with leftover fabric. So I'm just going to cut 2 long strips of the measurement that they have in here. I don't remember which step it's on, but it tells you how long your drawstring needs to be. I'm just going to use some fabric that I have and just cut 2 long pieces, and that's what I'm going to use for my drawstring. You all will see it in the video when we get to that step. But once you have everything cut out, you transfer your markings and you are ready to sew. Let's get started with step 1.
To get started, I'm going to be putting on a new jersey ballpoint needle since we are sewing with knit fabric, and I will be using a zigzag stitch for most of the stitches in this project. First things first, we're going to finish off the center front of our front piece. I just want to give that a clean finish before we started stitching those pieces together. Next, we need to fold and create a narrow hem along the lower edge of our front piece. So go ahead and press under 5/8 of an inch, and then you can fold under that raw edge to create a narrow hem. Once you have that pressed, you can go ahead and stitch it along the inner fold. So again, press up and create a narrow hem and go ahead and stitch it in place. Once you have your narrow hem stitched in place, you want to go ahead and lay your front pieces right sides facing, pin through your small circles at your notches, and also match up your lower edge like I'm doing here. I will say, as I was sewing my narrow hem, I noticed my zigzag stitch was really narrow, so I did make some adjustments to kind of lengthen that out just a little bit. So just play around with your stitch until you're happy with the way it is looking. After you have it pinned, go ahead and stitch at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have your seam sewn, you want to go ahead and press it open flat like I'm doing here. And our next step, we're going to create the casing for our drawstring. To do that, we're going to stitch in a scant 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side of our center front. The term scant, it just means that it's barely that measurement or barely that stitch seam allowance that it's recommending. So it's like 1 to 2 stitches short. Me personally, I just went ahead and stitched at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this is what mine look like. Again, I did it on either side and I did use a zigzag stitch. Next up, we can go ahead and start creating our drawstring. So if you did not purchase like a separate trim or ribbon to use for your drawstring or cording, you can just make your own like I'm doing here. So I cut 1 inch wide strips of fabric by 35 inches long, and I'm just going to stitch at like a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want it really tiny so that I'm only having like a 1/4 of an inch remaining after I turn it right side out. So that is what I've done here. I just stitched a really tiny little stitch. I'm going to grab a loop turner I'm going to stick it through the drawstring like I'm doing here. If you don't have a loop turner, you can also use like a safety pin and just kind of push that down to get the loop to turn right side out. I'm sorry, I went off camera a little bit. I could not see, so I had to get a little bit closer. But once you have, again, your loop turner hooked, you can just pull your drawstring right side out. And also, if you don't have one, again, you can use a safety pin to do the same thing. So again, just go ahead and turn your drawstrings right side out. I'm going to hook one end to a safety pin, and then I'm just going to start pulling it through the drawstring opening that we left the casing forward on one side. So as you can see, I just have it hooked to the safety pin. I'm just pulling it through one side of the casing that we just created. Once I have one drawstring pulled through, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side so that I have both drawstrings in the casing that we created. So go ahead and pull those through, and then your top portion will start to take a little bit of shape. And what I really like is that you can adjust this to your comfort level, so you can have it more ruched or less ruched. That decision is up to you. Now we're going to go ahead and baste right along the top. So to do that, you want to bring down your drawstring so that it is even with the raw edge of the bodice. So I'm just pulling mine down slightly so that, again, everything is even. And then you just want to do a basting stitch right along the top to hold it in place. So I've done my basting stitch here. Now we can go ahead and put the front to the side and start to work on the lower front. So we're going to match up our notches like I'm doing here, and we're going to pin in place down the entire center front. Again, this is the lower front piece. So go ahead and grab your pins and go ahead and pin in place now. Once you have it pinned, you want to stitch at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to start at the hem and work my way up to the top. Once you have it sewn, you want to go ahead and press your seam. As you can see, I did use a zigzag stitch, and I went ahead and finished off my seam allowance. I just finished them off together, and I'm pressing them to one side. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem along the top of the lower front. So the same narrow hem that we created along the bottom of the upper front, we're going to do the same narrow hem. So you just want to press under 5/8 of an inch, create a narrow hem, and then stitch it in place. Once you have that stitch, now we're going to match up our upper front to our lower front, and you want to make sure that you match up your notches and circles that you transferred. Once you have everything matched up, go ahead and pin it in place like I'm doing here. So again, I just laid my upper front over the lower front, matching up my notches, and I am pinning them in place. So go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Continue to pin your sides, making sure that you match up your notches and your dots, and also ensure that you have both right sides facing up. We only just lapped the top front over the lower front, all right? So after you have it pinned, go ahead and baste it in place like I've done here. After you have it basted, we can go ahead and put this to the side and start to work on our back piece. So grabbing your back pieces with the right sides facing, you want to go ahead and pin them in place. I am pinning from the bottom, working my way up to the top. Also make sure that you match up your notches. And I'm also going to stitch starting at the hem, working my way up to the top. I will be using a zigzag stitch, and then I'm also going to finish off my seams with my serger, and then I'll press them to one side. Once you have your center back seam sewn, again, you want to go ahead and press your seam going to one side like I'm doing here. After you have your seam pressed, you want to go ahead and lay your front and back pattern pieces right sides facing, and now we're going to stitch our shoulder seams together. I know the instruction says to do the shoulder seams and the side seams now, but I'm going to install my sleeves using the flat sleeve method. I find it much easier when working with knit garments. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. So first, we're just going to pin and sew our shoulder seams together using a narrow zigzag stitch. Well, mine isn't as narrow. I'm using about a 2.5 width and about a 3.0. I'm playing between a 3.0 and 3.5 length of my zigzag stitch. But again, after you have your shoulders pinned, go ahead and stitch them. Your settings may be different, but use whatever setting you like. Go ahead and stitch your shoulder seams. Once you have them sewn, you want to go ahead and finish them off with a serger like I've done here. And I've pressed my seam going toward the back of my dress. So now let's go ahead and start working on the sleeves, installing them using the flat sleeve method. So as you can see, I have my pattern pieces facing up. The back is going one way, the front is going the other. I'm going to match up my shoulder seam of my sleeve first and pin there. After I have that pin, I'm going to match up my double notches, making sure everything lines up. I'm going to pin there first. And then I'm also going to do the same for the front single notch. I'm going to match that notch up and pin. And then I'm just going to go in between and just fill it in to make sure that I am pinning the sleeve in place really nicely and I'm not leaving anything too wide of gaps. So just go ahead and pin your sleeve in place like I'm doing here. Take your time. As you can see here, it's a lot more of the sleeve cap than it is the sleeve. So this is where you really just want to use a lot of pins to really just ease in the fullness of the sleeve cap. Again, if you prefer to follow the instructions to get yours installed, your sleeve, go ahead and do that. But I prefer to do it this way again when I'm working with knit garments. And it's just about using a lot of pins to really ease in that fullness. And as you can see, there's no more fullness. It's easing in really, really nicely. So just take your time, put as many pins as you need, and just go ahead and pin your sleeve in place. Once you have your sleeve pinned, you can go ahead and do your other sleeve the exact same way. Take your time, pin that one in, make sure that you match up your shoulder seams and all your notches and go ahead and stitch it. I did use another zigzag stitch and I also finished off my seam with my serger. Here's just a closer look at how my sleeve looks. So again, after you have yours installed, now we can go ahead and close up our side seams using one continuous stitch. So I'm going to match up my underarm seam. I'm going to pin that in place. Then I'm just going to match up the notches along my sleeve as well as along the side seam of my dress. I'm going to pin all of that in place. Once you have your side seams pinned in place, you want to do it for both sides. Once you have it pinned, you want to start stitching at the bottom of the dress, work your way all the way up to the sleeve, and then do it in just one continuous stitch. After you have it sewn, your side seams should look like this. You can go ahead and finish off your edges like I've done with my serger. And now we're going to work on our neckline. We're going to create another 5/8 of an inch narrow hem right along the neck, the same way that we did for the lower edge of the front and the upper edge of the front skirt. If you find that you have a little bit too much bulk where your drawstring is, then you can just clip away some of that excess since it's already secured in place. Just clip away some of that excess. That way you can get a better narrow hem around your neckline. So again, go ahead, fold under 5/8 of an inch. Then you're going to fold under the raw edge, press it in place, and then stitch it the same exact way we've done the other narrow hems for this project. Okay, I have my neckline finished, so here's just a closer look at mine. Now the last two things we need to do is to hem our sleeve as well as hem our dress. So for your sleeve, you can either fold up 1/4 of an inch or you can just serge that and fold it up and stitch your hem in place. And for the hem of the dress, we can do another 5/8 of an inch narrow hem. So go ahead and finish off the hems of your dress. Remember that you can adjust your ruching to be more ruched or less ruched, whatever your comfort level is. I really do hope that you all love your dress. Once your hems are finished, you are all done.
That is all for the video, and I really do hope that you all enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave them down for me below. I'll be more than happy to answer. Be sure to like the video and subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you do not miss when I upload my next video. I really am looking forward to getting on more of a schedule, maybe posting twice a week. So again, I don't want you to miss any videos. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Blessings, everyone. Bye.